Station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
And good morning, everyone, and welcome to INCRadio Florida. I'm your host this morning, Brother Robert DePaulis, coming to you from what's typically a very sunny and warm southern Florida. But here in Tampa this morning, it was actually down to 48 degrees, which, you know, for a Floridian is something that we're not normally accustomed to. But, we tolerate our winters here very well in Florida, or at least we try to do the best that we can when we're not able to head down to the beach and enjoy those warm waters. But we are very, very much, happy to have you joining us this morning. We've got a very exciting topic that we're going to be talking about. Of course, today is Saturday, November 30th. It's the last day of the month of November. This year has completely just flown by so quickly, and we are just so grateful that all of you were able here to join us. So many of you that joined us throughout this year on many of our programs, and today we're going to be talking about I'd almost like to call it a debate, and I wish a couple of our other co-hosts were with us this morning, but we are going to be talking about whether or not certain activities are considered a sport or not a sport. And I'm going to actually be needing some help from our audience here this morning. So if you're watching live, please stay tuned and be prepared to help me out here in the chat, because I'll be asking about these different activities and whether or not you, our viewing audience, think that it's actually a sport or not. We've got our Unity Games throughout the country that have been happening. Here in Florida, we're going to be having Unity Games for us as well. And typically, when you think about the Unity Games here in the Church of Christ, those typically comprise of activities like track and field and basketball and volleyball and a lot of the more traditional sports activities. But of course, now as the Unity Games itself has evolved, there are many new activities that are part of that tournament as well that may or may not be considered a sport. So we're going to be talking about that today. And we're just so excited to have all of you joining. And of course, we want to thank all of you that are here. Please let us know where you're tuning in from. And we'd love to hear your feedback on whether or not the topic we're going to be talking about today, or the activities we're talking about today, are a sport or not a sport. So let's go ahead and see if I can go ahead and share our presentation today. So this way we can talk a little bit more about whether or not the sports or the activities that are in the upcoming Unity Games are actually something that you would consider a sport. Let's take a look here. Now, hopefully be able to get the screens here to show all of you here in our audience what the different sports activities are that we're wanting to share with you this morning. So let's take a quick look at those activities. So let me see. And as we take a look at the different activities, let me see if we can share this here. All right. And hopefully for the rest of you that are joining us this morning, that you are enjoying warmer weather than, of course, what we are dealing with here in our area, because it certainly is, as I said this morning, for us Floridians, much, much cooler than it's typically expected to be, because normally we're so accustomed to 70, 80 degrees here in Florida. And of course, this morning it was like 48. It's going to warm up to about 65 degrees, I think, later this morning. But hopefully it will be still warm enough that a lot of people will be able to go out and enjoy the outdoors. It is beautiful. It is sunny outside. So we're talking today about whether or not certain sports or activities are sports or not a sport. And as we take a look at the first series of activities, as I mentioned earlier, when we think about the Unity Games, typically we talk about volleyball and track and field, tennis, basketball. These are all more of your traditional activities that you find in the Unity Games. And when you look up what a sport is, I actually wanted to find out what the definition of a sport. And when I was looking up what the definition of a sport is, it says it's an activity that involves physical exertion and skill, which either an individual or a team who can compete against others either for entertainment or in a competition. So, of course, that means that these activities that you see on the screen here would be what you would consider a sport. Now, when you look at the less traditional activities that we're now beginning to see, we're seeing activities that probably are what some may consider less athletic, I guess is the term that we're looking at. So, for example, the first one, and this is something that's been introduced. It's actually been something around that's been around for a number of years, but this particular activity is called sport stacking. And if you're looking at the screen, you're probably wondering, well, it's a bunch of cups that have just been kind of stacked on top of each other. As you can see, these aren't your typical cups. I would probably avoid putting any fluid in them because they've got holes in the bottom. And they have holes specifically because they're designed to make this more competitive. Now, sport stacking, or what they call cup stacking, is an individual, or it can actually be a team sport. They've actually classified it as a sport, where you're stacking anywhere from 9 to 12 very specially designed cups in a predetermined sequence, meaning you're creating, like what you see here on the screen, is a pyramid. But then the whole sport stacking part of it is that you're actually then taking that and then breaking it down into a single stack and then building it back up again. Sounds really, really simple. But when you actually do it in practice, it requires a lot of hand-eye coordination. It requires a lot of focus and concentration and stability, because you can very easily, as you can see, knock down those cups, and those cups will then obviously makes it more difficult for you to stack. So the whole point of the activity is to be able to put the cups into a predetermined sequence as quickly as possible. Now, you think, well, taking these 6 cups and then breaking them down into a stack of 3 and then putting them back up again should be something pretty simple. But what you'd be surprised at is when you're doing it, the amount of time it takes in trying to get them to stack. Did you know that the world record right now, currently, for stacking these, and I guess the sequence is called a 3-6-3, which is actually taking the cups in the state you see it now, which is stacked up as 6, then breaking it down into 3 separate stacks, and then building it back up again. The record for that is 1.6 seconds. In 1.6 seconds, someone was able to take these cups, break them down into 3 separate stacks, and then build them back up again. 1.6 seconds is literally the blink of an eye. So it's definitely something that I think would require a lot of practice. My hand-eye coordination isn't the best, so I'd probably end up leaving more of a mess than I would actually stacking any of the cups. But I want to toss it out to our audience and ask, do you guys think that sport stacking is a sport? Would you consider that a sport, or is it more of a game? What do you guys think? As I'm looking through our chat here, do you guys think that this is more of a sport, or is it more of a game? Because, to competitors, I've actually watched a couple of these things on YouTube. You can actually see that there is a lot of concentration involved in sport stacking or speed stacking. So it could be a sport, could be an activity. I think to a lot of people, they would consider this to be actually a sport because of the team aspect of it. Now let's go to the next one. Next one is almost similar in a way, because it requires a tremendous amount of hand-eye coordination. And that is something called speed cubing, or I guess in the early days, back in the 90s, when I was just a wee child, a young little lad, we'll call it, speed cubing was also known as Rubik's Cubes. And this actually started off as literally just a game for you to entertain yourself with. When you're sitting there and you're just wanting to learn how to organize all of these different panels, so this way the colors are all of the same. That's the objective of speed cubing. But it's become actually something that's been much, much more competitive. It's something that requires you to have a very competitive mind. It's really centered around the rapid solving of a puzzle. And so when you hear the word puzzle, then you're sort of thinking, well, is this really a sport, or is this more of a game? And when you look at the way that the competitors, the people who are actually doing this, and the speed in which they're able to put these panels together and get them in the same colors, I would say that the amount of coordination, hand-eye coordination that's required would almost qualify. This should actually qualify this to be a sport. Now, another interesting note: speed cubing, or Rubik's Cubes, the world record for doing that is 3.13 seconds. It takes me about that long just to be able to look at the cube and determine what I even want to do next as my first move. 3.13 seconds to be able to solve it from the state that you see it in on the screen, where all of the color panels are mixed. Someone's able to actually take this and convert it into all of those same colored panels in less than 3.5 seconds. That's just an incredible, incredible feat. And I strive to just actually be able to say that I finished it once, and I don't think that I actually have. So it's one of those activities that definitely, again, there's not necessarily a team component to it, but the skill required and the hand-eye coordination required, I think it actually qualifies this to be considered a sport. So let's go to the next one. The next one is darts. Now, this has been around actually in Unity games for a while. I remember years and years and years this game, activity, or sport in some cases, was in different Unity games. And what a lot of people don't realize, when you go to play darts, you typically look at it as an activity where the objective is to just get as many of your darts, your little pointy things, into the bullseye, into that center part of the dartboard, which is that little red circle in the middle. And you're thinking that that's the objective. It's just to try to get as many into that small bullseye as possible. But it really is much more sophisticated than that. You have different ways of scoring, where all of those different areas of the dartboard actually represent different points or different objectives. And you sometimes have to try to match that with your opponent, or you're trying to score the points based on whatever the score assignment is for that particular part of the dartboard. So that's always been an interesting concept, because a lot of people just think, I'm just throwing them, just try to get it in the middle, which for me, I couldn't do anyway. But this way, now when you go in and you're trying to match it around all of the different areas of the dartboard, that actually makes it even more competitive, because now you've got to actually try to match your opponent as well. And it is considered a professional throwing sport. It's been around for many, many years, even outside, actually predominantly outside of the United States, in many of the European nations, especially in the British Isles, where it's a very popular sport. So they call it a professional throwing sport. So darts, I think, qualifies. We definitely are going to give that a thumbs up and consider it a sport. It's not necessarily something that's a team sport, more of an individual sport, but it is still a sport nonetheless. Chess. Chess has been around for as long as I can remember in Unity games. It is a very, very mind-focused sport, if you will. I think it's an activity where you, as an individual against another opponent, are using strategy and skill that you've developed, and mostly experience, in learning how to master the board. And one of the things that I think makes chess extremely inviting is the fact that it knows no age boundaries. One of the beauties of this is that because it is more of a mental sport or mental game, it doesn't require that you have to go work out and stretch beforehand, which is actually my perfect kind of sport. You just have to go in, sit down, be focused, and understand the strategy on the board. And it doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter your gender. Everyone can play in the sport and actually participate and be very proficient. There are many chess masters out there that are young children, if you will, and there are many chess masters that are out there that truly are masters and are a lot more mature. So it's a great sport, it's a great game. A lot of generations and families are really encouraging the future generations to learn the sport as well, which I think is really neat, because then it's something that you can sit and play as a pastime with your children and your grandchildren. So chess continues to be something extremely competitive. It's become very popular in pop culture. They made movies about chess masters and different different ways that it's been portrayed. So I think it's one of the key things to help keep your mind sharp and focused, is to really become more proficient in chess. So chess, to me, I'm going to check that off, and we're going to call that actually a sport. Now, this one's controversial, because I guarantee you pickleball, as brand new as it is without a doubt considered a sport. If you saw, I think it was about 3 months ago, we had, maybe 4 months ago, we had an entire episode dedicated to pickleball. It's the pickleball craze. It's something here in Florida. It's become just a wild, wild, far-reaching sport or activity because so many people down here. I think maybe it has something to do with the good weather that we've got, but because again, it is a lot less intensive and it has a lot less impact on your joints, supposedly, as playing tennis because it doesn't move. They say it doesn't move as quickly as tennis would because the ball is slower than a tennis ball. Having played several rounds of pickleball with certain people in the district, Kai James, I'm calling you out. I can guarantee you, and also Brother Angelo, that it does require a lot of speed. And depending on who you're playing with, the game, the sport of pickleball can actually be very intense or it can be very relaxing. And I think that's probably the big appeal to pickleball, is because depending on who you're playing with, you can slow the game down and you can have it be just a very slow series of volleys. So this way, is you're playing with people who may not be at the same skill level. They have an opportunity to catch up, if you will. With tennis, it's a little bit more difficult because there you almost have to have a certain level of skill just when you're starting to play, just because how quickly the ball moves. So I think that's the big appeal to pickleball and why it's exploded in growth over the last several years. I remember when they used to talk about pickleball here in Florida years ago, it was typically something that was associated with retirement communities and people who, maybe couldn't play tennis any longer because they just didn't have the speed or the strength that they used to have. So pickleball became sort of the default sport, paddle sport that they would play. But now you go to pickleball courts, one, if you could find one that's open because it's so crowded. Two, the families that are playing there are all ages, all genders. And the sport is something that's easy to pick up. I learned how to play it I think it was like a few hours in the morning, and it can be very addicting. And it's a sport that I think every family member can get involved in. It's a great way to just get out and get some activity without necessarily having anything that's going to be extremely impactful on your joints and requires a tremendous amount of athleticism. Of course, you're going to need to be able to move around the court a little bit, but again, because of the nature of the speed of the sport, you can gauge it so this way everyone can participate, everyone can have a good time. So pickleball, I think without a doubt, I'm not going to even question it, is definitely going to be considered a sport. And so you pickleballers that are out there, we recognize you. You are definitely athletes at any age, at any level. So it is considered a sport. All right, as we're winding down here, now this next one is, I think, even more controversial in considering it a sport because it premiered this past Olympics, and that is breakdancing. Breakdancing in the 80s was a staple, for those of us that grew up in the 80s, where it was more of a form of entertainment and more a form of expression. Even by virtue of the name, it's break dancing. It's what you call, break dancing is an activity that you do to just kind of express yourself with your friends, right? And you have competitions, and I think that's where it became something that they considered a sport, and why it even made its way into the Olympics is because the competitive component to breakdancing, where judges, again, it's like I guess no different than figure skating or gymnastics, where you have judges that are deciding whether or not your techniques are better than somebody else's techniques. And so breakdancing made its way into the Olympics this past year. Not so sure about what was considered the success of it or not. A lot of discussion, a lot of debate back and forth between many people on whether or not it really should be considered a sport. So I think this is still going to have a question mark on it about whether or not breakdancing is considered a sport. I guess we'll know if it makes its way back into the Olympics in the next 3 years. But it is definitely an activity that in pop culture is extremely popular. It started back in the 80s, earlier than that, actually, back in the 70s, and has still persisted even to today. It is far-reaching. Anywhere in the world that you travel, you hear about the youth and the adults who love breakdancing. It's a culture in some places. It's sort of the hip hop culture that they refer to. So I think the jury is still out about whether or not breakdancing would be considered a sport or not, but it's definitely around for a while. It's going to be here, and it's definitely entertaining, if not for anything else. All right, down to the bottom of the list. Gamers unite, come together. You guys consider yourselves athletes? E-games is a very, very popular sort of cultural phenomenon. Now, if you see back in the early 80s and early 90s, sitting there and playing on your game console was just a way to kind of entertain yourself, right? And many of those games have a competitive component to it, but you were able to compete with each other all over the world, simply through your connection through your console. Well, now e-games has become sort of this popular activity. It's actually considered esports, so maybe we are going to consider this a sport because you work in teams, and as teams, you connect with other teams, either locally or over the internet, and you compete. And many of these can get very intense. And when they say whether or not there's physical exertion, I've watched a couple of these on, on YouTube and other streaming services, and I'll tell you that I've seen some of these folks sweat. So there's definitely some exertion. Not sure if it's more mental exertion than anything else or stress, but definitely there's a lot of focus involved, a lot of strategy, like with chess that we were talking about earlier. But more importantly, I think here, the team component and being able to work with your team to meet an objective and defeat the other team is one of the aspects of it that makes this considered a sport. And so the name esports, I wish we had a little graphic with a checkbox. I think we'll consider this an actual sport. It continues, especially with so many of the youth today growing up from an early age already exposed to a lot of these console type games and online games, that they develop their proficiency, their skill, and a lot of their hand-eye coordination so early in life that by the time they're in their mid-teens, they become very proficient, and they're able to join these esports teams at a very young age and already begin competing. So I think esports definitely is around for a while, and it's going to be considered a sport. So the upcoming, Unity games that are happening all across the country here at the Churches of Christ throughout the country and around the world, as you can see, there continues to be this variety of sports, and really the goal is because they want there to be as much inclusion in the sports for all ages and all genders. They want the families to be able to participate. And I think that's what really makes this very, very unique. Is we call it the Unity Games for a reason. It's called the Unity Games because we want to unite together in fellowship with each other. We want everyone to be able to join, participate, have a good time, and most of all, continue to come together for these activities to help uplift one another. And that's regardless of whether or not what you're participating is a sport or not. I think these different activities really opens the doors for everyone to be able to participate, because definitely I am slowing down in my more mature years. So maybe track and field, not so much. Chess is probably going to be something I'm going to need to start focusing a little bit more on. But before we end the show, I want to take a quick moment to call out and give shout outs to a few of our folks that are watching us this morning. We are so grateful to everyone that joins every day. We have such a tremendous audience, and everyone who comes to join us. We love hearing from you and seeing your comments. Of course, Sister Melka Newcomb, who is one of our biggest fans here in the District of Florida, the wife of our beloved District Minister, Brother Lowell Newcomb. She says, greetings to all the brethren, officers, ministers, ministers' wives, and children here in Florida. from the Newcomb family. So thank you so much. Sister Mary Ellis Borges, good morning po to everyone. Good morning to you. We have Sister Chelsea Castellano. Good morning to you, Sister Chelsea. Good morning to everyone po. Happy Saturday viewing. And she's coming to us from the local of Orlando, Florida. We also have Brother Ray Castellano, Sister Chelsea's wonderful husband. Good morning to all my brethren here in the District of Florida, Brother Ryan DeSena, Sister Annalisa DeSena. We got a lot of couples that are on here today. We love that. Happy Saturday, everyone, and hope everyone is well. And of course, Sister Jennifer Trinidad there from California, getting up early. Hello, everyone. This is Sister Jennifer from the local of Long Beach, Orange County, California. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning there. So thank you for getting up early and joining. Brother Adrian joining us from South Las Vegas. And it says, good morning from South Las Vegas by way of Salt Lake City. So doing a lot of traveling there from our number one fan there on the West Coast, Brother Adrian Belgas. And then also Sister Amor, good morning, Paul. And then we also have from Gem A, happy Saturday, brethren, and greetings from South Jacksonville. And then last but not least, we want to also give a shout out from Brother Reginald Mangahas. Good morning to everyone viewing INCRadio Florida from St. Petersburg, Sarasota in the District of Florida. And Sister Arnie J, joining us from Fort Worth, Texas. They are actually, Sister Arnie and Brother Nate are part of INCRadio South Central States. They're coming up next right after this, so please stay tuned. They're going to be talking about family, and I think that's always a topic that everyone loves to talk about, is their family, especially as we're coming to the end of the year. So let's make sure that we are able to tune in and join that. But for now, we also want to thank, of course, our beloved executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, who helps to support this program of INCRadio Florida, and of course our SEPSI CEO and President, Brother Angelo Irania Manalo as well, for allowing us to be able to have this program and supporting the many programs in the Church of Christ or INCRadio. But for now, this is Brother Robert Topalis here in Tampa, Florida. Again, we are the fastest 30 minutes on radio. Even if I'm by myself, we're still the fastest 30 minutes on radio. We're going to be moving over to our next program, which is the INCRadio South Central Studio, satellite studio. So please stay tuned for that. But for now, have a wonderful Saturday. Please, whatever activity you happen to be joining in, if you're going to be joining any activity, consider it a sport, have fun, go out and do something, anything to be able to get your body moving. So for now, this is Brother Robert. We'll see you next week. Have a great end of November and a start of December.
This is INC Radio, DCE.